Hey everyone, Joe Carroll here. Excited to be with you guys today. I love doing this stuff and I hope you enjoy watching it as well. Today I wanted to address something that brings out a lot of questions, and I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with in their mixing. So I kind of want to show you my approach to it, and that is how I try to achieve just a good tight bottom end, and it's mostly diet and exercise. That is a joke. All right, so what we're going to talk about bass, low end of a record, and how we kind of get the kick drum and the bass guitar to work together to be a nice, consistent, tight thing. And so I was mixing a song, and it's not done yet, so forgive the level imbalances as we move from section to section. Just kind of dialing in sounds, and I thought it would be a great one to share with you guys today. So. I can't name the artist yet, but it's someone that you all know and love. All right, so here's kind of the vibe. So kind of a modern pop ballad, kind of moody. You'll see it starts at different sections. It's really broke down with just pads and piano. And like I said, it's not mixed yet, so all the balances are kind of off. The band does come back in full on the second verse, and the drums and bass are kind of like this kind of a deal. But that chorus, the second chorus that I played you, that's kind of as big as the song gets. So a couple things. There is no one step. Hey, this is how you do bottom end. Anyone that teaches that, I think, is teaching you wrong. There's a lot of different things we try to achieve with our low end. Sometimes the bass drum is the driving focus. Sometimes the bass guitar is the driving focus. But no matter what, they have to work together. And sometimes we're looking for really warm and fat and round and sustainy. And sometimes even our bass part is more of a percussive bass. There's just lots of different things. So what I've tried to do is build a template that has a lot of the tools that I would need to create all of the above. So whatever I hear from that song, and you know, I can go after that. I can chase that from within the template without bringing up almost anything, just making things active and inactive. That said, when I listen to this song, the bass drum, the kick drum, is not a powerful defining thing. I mean, it needs to be somewhat powerful in chorus two, but this is a song. You've heard me talk about this. The way I picture things, I'm trying to suck the listener into the speakers. I'm trying to pull them in. I'm not trying to push them back with power. So I'm not doing the sharp, pointy kick drum thing. You know, think of the Chris Lord-Alge heavy rock thing. You know, that's not what I'm trying to do here. So I'm trying to craft a bass drum that is just punchy enough to be heard, but not at all get in the way of all the atmospheric, patty things that go along with her vocal, because that's the focus. That's what the listener needs to focus on. So that said, keeping in mind what I just said, let's check out this chorus, and you'll hear where I've got the kick drum living. So it's full and it's got a little bit of a punch, but not overly punchy. So how do I clear space in the bass guitar to have that still punch enough that it's not overpowering to the listener and not pulling their attention away from anything, but at the same time defining the tempo? So that's what we're going to do. So here's the bass guitar part, and I'm just going to make these plugins that I've been using inactive because, like I said, this is a work in progress, so it really doesn't matter how I mess it up. Okay, so that said, you'll see I have things inactive, and when I first open my template, usually that are the only two things that's up, because my go-tos currently, are a SSL 9000. And there's a very good reason for that. The SSL 9000 from Brainworks has this THD right here, which gives me a level of circuit saturation so I can get some more bite on the attack. Because a lot of times That's what we're missing, right? We're missing some definition. We sometimes we have plenty of low end, more low end than we'd ever know what to do with, but we don't really hear the part. It's kind of mushy down there. So anything we can do to bring out definition sometimes is a great thing. But when I bring up my template, all this is zeroed out. So the frequency boosts that you see here are not a thing. The only thing that will be on is the high pass and the low pass, because I'm always going to filter right around 50, almost, unless it's an 808 or something like that. If it's an an electric bass guitar, I am going to filter out 50 and below. And then also, I don't need any of that the noise that occurs from just having a line level instrument, or I'm sorry, an instrument level instrument plugged into a DI, going through a preamp and a compressor. There's a noise floor and a hiss that can happen. So I don't need anything up above like 6, 7K on an electric guitar very often. So generally, I start right around 7K. So that top octave and a few hundred cycles below there, or a few thousand rather, are not making it to the final mix because there's nothing there we need. So that said, my next almost always ready to go but not doing anything at the time is a Blue Stripe 1176. And that is because it has a nice tightening quality, but also adds some of that aggression, some of that harmonic distortion that we were talking about earlier, that the listener doesn't hear as distortion. They just hear it as, hey, I can understand the notes. I can hear the fingers on the bass guitar strings plucking the strings. So here is the bass guitar part that we're going to be working with today in its raw form. Okay, so it sounds great. I mean, it sounds very nice, very round, very warm. It doesn't have much attack. It doesn't have very much presence. Nice lower end. It's kind of puffy, and you can see. I mean, you can clearly see there's quite a bit of compression applied during the tracking. That goes back to what I said. There's not a one size fits all. I've seen on YouTube. People say 6 dB of compression is always what I do. 10 dB. It's just not right. Every song is different. The way it comes to us is different. And so we need to listen to the instrument and not just go with a preset template and just always apply it. But some of the tools that I have ready to go is tape. I really like what it can do to the tightening on the bottom end. And I especially like on upright bass, acoustic bass on jazz and country and hillbilly rock, stuff like that. Sometimes you get the upright doghouse bass, double bass kind of thing. And sometimes the tape can really, really help tighten that up. On electric bass, sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. But nonetheless, let me just kind of play it and show you what I'm looking for. And usually I'm going to go with something in 15 IPS because I'm looking for the slower tape speed outcome. With and without, and you'll have to use, if you're using your phone speakers to listen to this, you're probably not going to hear some of these differences. Nonetheless, here we go. Okay, so the difference that it makes can really vary from track to track. So it's not an every mix thing for me. My next there, if I need it, tool is multiband compression, and that is really valuable on upright basses, acoustic basses, because they all, because they're an acoustic instrument with an F hole that has a body of a certain size, there are notes that really, really project and explode more than others. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. And mic placement can help, but it can never, it's not enough on its own, of course, to pull back a little bit to get rid of some of that boom. So that's where something like this can come in handy. And you'll look at my preset here that I kind of start with. And just a 2-band is all I need because all I'm trying to compress is the bottom end. So check this out. So this is a level of tightening that I can get to keep the low end kind of in check, where I'm still hearing the presence and I'm not having some of the low notes just really jump out at times. And there's a couple things you can do here. So you can compress too much, heavy-handed, to get kind of a real tightening effect on the low end, and then just make up the gain here. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So now I'm compressing that bottom end really heavy, but you don't hear it as out of balance or anything like that because I'm making up the gain here. So that's one way of, if you've got a treble instrument where it's just like, I cannot get the tone of this guy to not be flabby and tubby. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. This is a way. So you can just slide your crossover around to affect as much of the low end as you do or don't want to affect. But this is a really valuable tool. Let me go back to my preset here. And you'll see on the low end, the attack, a lot of times it's anywhere from 1 millisecond to 10, somewhere in that range. And the release is a little bit slow. Around 300 milliseconds, a third of a second, seems to be a really good spot to where I almost never have to change it. So that's tool number one. But I feel like in this song, it's such a fine recording and it's played so well, I don't really need that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go right to the SSL here. And you'll see, if you're wondering why the screen looks like this, I have solid state logic control surfaces, including the UC1. And they've got this feature called 360 Link where I can control EQs and compressors and stuff like from all other manufacturers. And so that is kind of the behind the scenes bones to make this work with my control surface. That's all that is. But let's zero this out. But you'll see what I did. I was adding quite a substantial amount of upper mids in addition to that filtering we already discussed. No dynamic control, no noise gate, of course. And then I'm also ducking a little bit of 166 cycles. So let's just see why I was doing what I was doing. So let's listen to it in real time. That's some really nice fretting sound, some attack sound within the bass. And yes, I'm doing it in solo at this time so you can kind of hear what we're doing. Now in the low mid, let's put the drums in. Let me turn the drum group on and make sure everything comes in. And let's turn the drum group on with it. So now that I hear the two together, what I'm hearing is that when the kick drum hits, the overall low end of the entire mix is going to be too fluffy for me. So I'm going to go down to this band right here, and you'll see that I'm using a pretty broad Q. So I'm always going to go around a Q of 1 or even broader because I don't want to reduce just certain notes. I'm looking for more of a range of the instrument. I don't want certain notes to just kind of disappear. So if you use a tight Q, that's the danger. So it's going to be a broad Q of around 1 or even smaller, like 0.7 or something like that. But one thing that we can do here with the SSL is sometimes that fluffiness is to me is as low as like 150 cycles. So by, not every low mid band will go to that range. So by choosing this option right here on the Brainworks, I can go all the way down to 67 cycles. So let's just start around 150 and start sweeping from there. So that's in addition to the THD and the overall sound of an SSL, that is why I use the Brainworks 9000 on the low end of the bass guitar. Okay, so now let's hear this going with the kick drum. It's right there for me. I'm still hearing that warm hug of the bass guitar just consistently wrapping around the track. But now when the kick drum hits, they're kind of working together to me. They're not fighting against each other. Now I can always add low end, and sometimes that's exactly what I do, but you can't just do a set it and forget it template for low end for me, because right now I'm hearing plenty of low end. So I'm not going to boost 80 cycles or 90 cycles to get even more. But the next song I may. All right, so let's just see how this is working out. Okay, now For tone tightening, I don't want to get too carried away because I want to EQ into compression. And you're like, well, it looked like it was already compressed quite a bit when it was tracked, and it was, but I still feel like the tone can be tighter. So what I like to do is use one of a couple different tools to compress in a way that it doesn't. I'm not being overly brutal, but I can be if I want to. And a Blue Stripe 1176 is one of those tools. Using the 10 and 2, or what some people call the Dr. Pepper setting of an attack of 3 and a release of 5, it's kind of invisible, kind of neutral. And we'll see my kind of go-to preset here. Let's see how much gain reduction we're getting. Okay, wonderful. Now I'll play with and without just so you kind of hear the effect it's having. With compression. Definitely an improvement. So we needed a few more dB of tightening to place it in the track. Now, let me make this inactive and show you one of my other tools that I keep ready to go. And that is this guy right here, the Acme XLA3. And the reason I choose it sometimes, the Blue Stripe is one level of aggression. The harmonic buzz that we were talking about that it just does in the upper mid-range is really cool. This takes that and runs with it even a whole lot heavier handed. Check it out. See how much more alive the attack of the instrument becomes just because it puts this. In fact, let's solo up the bass so you're not confused with how much attack is from the drum elements and how much is from the bass guitar. I'll bypass it and make it active. Okay, sometimes that is all the buzz, all the attack that I need. So that's why that tool is there ready to go. So I get tone tightening, I get the tubey, fluffy bottom end. And the reason on this mix that I'm deciding to stay with the 1176 is because I like the bottom end of the solid state. The tube bottom end of the Acme, a little bit too much bloom, really. So I'm going to stick with this. Okay, that said, now let's start putting the drums and the bass back in there together. All right, my next tool in the toolbox is a limiter. And that is because sometimes we encounter one of two different things. Intentionally very percussive bass tracks where they're popping and slapping a lot. And this is a way of getting some of that in order. And sometimes I will drag and drop this up earlier in the line if I want the limiter before all of my other treatment. But a lot of times it's post this stuff. You know, it's just the leftover little point that I'm trying to get rid of to put it down in the track. So I simply just drag this red thing down until I'm reducing the attack the amount that I want to. But in this song, I'm craving that attack. I want it. So I'm not going to use the limiter in this situation. But another place that the limiter can come in real handy is if the instrument is played fairly poorly. Some guys, you know, we have to work with all different levels of musicianship, and sometimes their dynamics are really, really wild and their attacks are really wild, and using something like that early in the chain, moving it up early in the processing can help bring some of those guys to a better starting point for you. Okay, now next, sometimes I want a lot of low end, and what I have going on right here is Subgen from SSL, and this is a monster. Let me just kind of show you what it's capable of, and you will have to be listening on a speaker that can listen to bottom end in order to hear its difference. But if I inactivate this thing at the preset that I start with, we're looking at this range right here, centered around 80 cycles of body. Here's without and with. So here that 80 cycles just really filling out. Like for years, a lot of us have used our bass from Waves or something like that for this task. I just really find that this is a really good one for me. And what I have is this band 2 right here. If I'm really trying to get in the basement, check this out. So that's what I'm adding. I'm soloing up the frequency that I'm adding that's so centered just under 40 cycles, around 40. So that's delivering the boom. So sometimes, man, if I really trying to bring the heavy, because the kick drum is allowing it, the mix is allowing it, I'll just bring this guy in. But that guy that's only for extreme uses. This is the one that would be more every day. This right here. So we're bringing that in, and as you can see, I'm compressing it a little bit too to make it more consistent. Okay, but this song does not need it. So I'm just going to simply make that inactive. And now the next thing that we have on the channel is Soothe 2. And let me kind of give you a feel for what that's going to accomplish. And this is a trick that's been around for a while. A lot of us have done this for years using different compressors, but I've switched to Soothe 2 fairly recently. I had a friend tell me that he had seen that Jason Joshua had used this, and he told me it was just a better tool, more transparent for this process than the tool he had been using in the prior. And so I tried it, and sure enough, I feel he was right. I feel like this is really better than some of the others I was using in the past, some compressors. And all it is that over here on the kick drums, you will see right here, there is a side chain that is always being fed right here. Always. So whether or not I use this trick or whether I don't, this is just always being sent, so I don't even have to think about it. If I bring up this plug in, you'll see right here it's being fed by the kick drum. And what it is rather than using, I've seen people teach a method where they always boost a certain frequency in the kick, and then in the bass they always cut a certain frequency that they, think makes space for the kick drum. And then sometimes they cut something in the kick drum to make space for the bass guitar, etc. And that is not wrong or right. I mean, I think there's a lot of us mixers that use different approaches, and at the end of the day still get the results that we're looking for, and that the end user and even our peers all love and respect. So we can only really teach what works for us. But rather than me having a static, okay, I'm going to cut the kick drum at 90 because I'm going to boost 90 on the bass guitar. That is cool. However, what I found worked better for me is that I am cutting the kick drum frequencies from the bass guitar only when the kick drum is playing. So otherwise, the bass guitar can be very full. So like I said, this is being fed by sidechain 1, and you'll see what I'm doing here. And I'll have to turn the drums on in order to do this. So every time the kick drum plays, the bass guitar is instantly getting ducked only around the fundamental of the kick drum. So around 60 cycles, and you can adjust this for a lot of different things. But I have all these other bands turned on or off rather, because I don't want to affect anything up there. So just down here, and you can see easily once you get it set, fast attack, fast release, and you choose your frequency and your cue, this depth knob will be really possibly the only thing you have to change on a mix by mix basis to get the amount of reduction that you want. So for example, here's the two together with no processing, and you will still hear, despite the EQ moves I've made and the tightening of the tone, there's still a lack of separation between the kick drum and the bass guitar when it kicks in. They're still kind of fighting just a little bit. Now check this out as I turn the depth knob up. So the kick drum is now, all of a sudden the kick drum, when it punches, it is speaking. It's speaking now. So there's room for it. And here it is within the mix. I'm hearing the kick drum is heavy and punchy to the point that I want it to be heavy and punchy for this arrangement, but I'm also hearing the sustain of the bass guitar really nice and consistent. So I'm well on my way to, I think, a successful bottom end for this mix. Now, the other trick is that I have this bass smash track. And you can do this with a plug-in, just using the mix knob directly on the bass guitar. You can put a stomp box or something like that on there. But what I found over the course of my years of doing this is typically, it's very common that I adjust the level between the amount of distortion and clean signal from section to section of the song. Because sometimes it brings out a lot of string squeaks and stuff that's just too aggressive for certain sections. So I bring it up as a separate track. You'll see I have bass smash, and all I do is copy my primary bass track down into that one. Or if I have an amp and a DI, I use the amp track a lot of times for this kind of a thing. But you can bring this up and you'll see what I've got in my template. It's nothing more than the bass guitar until I start processing it. So lately, a tool I have been really, really loving is the Pulsar 1178. To pull this off, the signal has to be very highly compressed. To me, that's kind of what makes it work, is the consistency of the distortion that I'm adding to it. So I'm going to get pretty heavy-handed. So I have that 1176, 1178 character of compression that I love so much on a bass guitar. And let's turn this distortion off. So watch this. So you'll see I'm getting somewhere between 15 and 20 dB of compression. I get it. That's very heavy-handed. And sometimes I want to allow more attack to pop through. Sometimes I want to chop it off. And that's another beautiful thing about the 1176, how customizable it is. But here is really where the power lies, and that is choosing a distortion characteristic. I'm really liking the warm for this. And this calibration knob here, you can drive into it harder or less hard. Check it out. That seems to be a pretty sweet spot. Now, the other tool that I use commonly is the smack compressor, and this is going to only be something that is available to Pro Tools users. But it's just been one of those that from years ago when they launched it, just had a wonderful built-in breakup that I really liked. So I keep that in my template ready to go because sometimes that flavor of distortion is just really, really sweet. Now, the thing is, you have to follow that with EQ because I've already got all that full body on the regular primary bass. So I'm not trying to add low end to it. So I'm going to follow it with some EQ that's going to filter out everything above and below what I don't want to add to the body that I already have. And for me, I've tried a lot of different plugins. For some reason, this R EQ, the sound that it has right in this range just does a thing for bass. So that's why I've stuck with it for all these years. So you'll see I'm rolling out everything below about 560 in my template and everything above a little above 3K. And that can change from song to song, but you'll hear it. Here's what's left over. Now I have two options here. So I can either get, if I want to get heavier handed, right? I can do it here, turning that screw and getting more distortion, or I have this band right here ready to go. Check it out. So I can kind of tune where the harmonics are happening. I can combine that with the regular bass and kind of decide where it helps cut through the track. So it's just that kind of a thing. And of course, usually I'm doing that with the track playing, of course, but I'm just trying to show you exactly what is happening here. So what I'll do then is I'm going to take the drums and the bass and I'll play them. And I'm going to simply slide this up until I like it. There, that's great. Now, what I'm hoping is I can play this in the mix in this busy chorus that has all these atmospheric elements and guitars and acoustics and everything else going. And I can pop that in, and all of a sudden, in addition to that low, sustaining, consistent bottom end that we've built, that's just kind of a warm hug with the track, we can add just a little bit of bite that also lets us know what note the bass guitar is playing. Check it out. You can really tell. So right now I've got my large speakers, the big Adams on, but you switch over to NS10s or you switch over to whatever small monitor you have, Avantones, I have Aratones over here. When I add that in and I can hear it on a small speaker too, a lot of times that's the magic spot. So right now I'm on the NS10s and I'll do the same thing. Perfect. And don't overthink it. That's the key. To me, I have all these tools ready to go because I don't know what the day is going to hold. But at the same time, I feel like sometimes we're our own worst enemy, and we over critique and over analyze things to the point of losing focus on the big picture of the mix. So I've heard Bob Clearmountain, I've heard CLA, I've heard numerous others in interviews years ago when they were asked about bottom end. Rather than getting into this kind of detail, I remember they're like, "Man, I put it in the track. I don't know what else to tell you. It's there." They don't over analyze it, and they deal with the problems that they're having at the time. If you don't have a problem, don't deal with it. There's plenty of tracks where this is not necessary. There's plenty of tracks where that buzz distortion track is not necessary. But by having it on a separate track, what I can do is, you will remember the verse right before that was a lot more broken down. If I want to, it's simply that now. And I'm done. So I have less of the distortion and just more of the consistent low end. And then when the chorus kicks in, I get that extra bite to pop through the busy track. There's one more thing I want to show you, and that is the fact that I have all the drums and bass going to a subgroup over here, and they are going through one of a couple different compressors that I like to choose. And the low end, you'll see on this chorus, is moving together. It's only like a dB, but that's why I put the drums and bass in a group together, is as the needles move, when the kick drum is triggering my stereo bus or my subgroup processor, they are kind of tying them together. I don't think that is a small thing. I believe that is kind of a big issue for me in hearing low end done well. So anyway, gang, man, I really appreciate you stopping by and hanging out with us for a little while. Hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed. And there's some tips and tricks that you can steal. And if you have some other favorite tools that you like to do these same things, you think there's something that works better than Soothe 2 or a better distortion than what I'm doing with the 1178, put them down in the comments so all our friends can, when they apply these techniques, can try. And instead of doing just what Joe does, maybe it's like, hey, I like what Jim or John or somebody else is doing better than that. So feel free to comment below, okay? All right, thanks so much for watching, and happy mixing.